I'm here with Rupert Guenther, who at the ESTA 2023 International Conference in Cardiff. Fantastic venue here at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. And Rupert's been here the whole week, haven't you?
Yeah, it's
involved
been great.
Involved in a jam session on, I think, the second evening.
Yep,
which was
huge.
Really brilliant.
It was like a chamber orchestra jam session.
Yeah, I mean, when you get a conference full of string teachers that actually, can play, it's brilliant. And then you've just this morning you've done your main sort of presentation. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from with that presentation.
Well, look, the whole idea of bringing it to Cardiff was that we've got the opportunity to talk to a lot of players and teachers, and what I'm doing is improvisation as a concert art. It's not an embellishment, it's not extemporizing on a Mozart sonata. You're the artist. It's like you go to an art gallery and hanging on the walls are all the pictures by the artist. So in my concerts, what's hanging on the wall is sounding in the hall.
Yeah.
What's in the hall is my music, my stories that I tell with my violin or my ensemble. And it was really just to explain to people how I go about that, because improvisation can mean a lot of different things to people, and our approaches are often very different. So I think it's educational.
And there's often a fear, isn't there, particularly in classical players, of this scary world of not having the notes.
Yeah, and I understand that, because that's my background as well. The first time, as I said in the interview, in the session today, my first experience of improvisation with the violin was a recording jingle, and then, can you just stay behind? The rest of the quartet goes home. We've got an end bit there, about 20 bars. Can you just make something up? And I was like, freeze.
I've been in exactly that position. Yeah. Literally, it's so scary.
Yeah. So we feel exposed, but the biggest thing I think that classical players have to come to terms with is the first thing that happens, we feel like we don't know what to do. So everyone says, I don't know what to do. I said the same thing. I said, I don't know what to do. And so what I'm trying to do is fill in the gaps for people so that they can feel like they know what to do, and I can go into more detail with that if appropriate. But basically, I just want to give people a picture. I did some demonstrations. We had some of the other delegates get up and play an improvisation as a string quartet. It was great.
Great. I think that's the great thing, because I'd not really come across it. I'm not saying formalised, because you're not formalising it, but maybe you're taking it seriously. The fact that you can use these skills that as classical players we've learned, but use them in an improvisatory way, and that it's that realisation that you've got the tools at your disposal, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing that I love about it, is that because I learnt to improvise from a jazz player, he taught me.
Great.
And that's a whole other story. That's a cafeteria story.
Yeah.
But what happened was I went home and classical is my language. And so what I love about this is that if we want to improvise, we might have been playing for 20 years. We don't have to go back to the beginning of jazz as a beginner. We've already got all the nuance and subtlety, so we can with this approach that I like using, it's already on board. We just bring all our classical training right from the first day. So it's not like we're classical players up to this level and we're improvisers down here. We start improvising, and the level of emotional storytelling and conveying of the music is right up there with our normal classical playing, and that I think is very special.
Yeah, I've got for those of you watching this, I've got a very good article that Rupert wrote for us for the last Arco magazine, and I'll link to that from this video. I think certainly when I was looking at that article that you sent in, I was immediately fascinated by the fact that I'd never come across anybody else actually saying you can use the skills you've got to create music. And you mentioned at the beginning, like being in an art gallery, and it is very much like that, isn't it? You don't think twice about a piece of art being a unique thing that somebody's just done. And here you're saying we can do that with classical music. We can just create a unique thing that has never existed before without having to be, maybe use that word, composer. I mean, how do you feel about it? Do you feel that we're all composers, or is it just that we're all creative artists? Is there a difference?
I think it's probably splitting hairs.
Yeah.
But in conventional sense, I guess I'm performer composer because I'm a concert artist and I do all my own music. So I think they call that, in the big world, they call that an original artist.
Exactly. And we're all aware of that now, aren't we? In the pop, in other genres, pop, rock, whatever.
And we
that's
take
the norm.
It is the norm, exactly. Yeah. And what's not the norm is people putting on exhibitions reproducing Rembrandts, which is what the classical world. And this is not a criticism in any way, folks. This is a absolute honouring of those traditions. And I wouldn't be the player I am today if I hadn't studied and continue to play, parts of repertoire. So. It's not to put anything down or discredit or say anything's out of date. It's not. But this is a pathway, I think an exciting pathway for musicians, that they can be an original artist. They don't have to go back to the beginning again as a composer. They can start right now, because I'll tell you a funny thing. If anyone's watching this has ever improvised, you can pull off a flourish. It's easy. And if we're jamming together doing stuff, you try writing all that down. And then the next thing is you try giving someone a score with all those dots on it. It's a huge, long process. Yeah. But if we're just painting our emotional and storytelling with the music, we can be doing all sorts of complexities because it's part of the storytelling. And we don't have that enormous challenge of trying to read dots with it. At the end of it, it's not that difficult, but learning it and getting there was. So
do you think that it presents a different approach to, for want of a better word, virtuosity, that when most classical players think of virtuoso, they think of Paganini or whatever it is, and that's hard, but we can approach it, if you're doing it as an improvisatory thing, you do it within your limits. Do you think?
Exactly.
And if you start something and you think, I don't want to go there, you just go somewhere else.
Exactly.
Do you think that's the sort of one of the major things about it?
I wouldn't say it's one of the major things, but I think it's certainly a big part of it is, well, firstly, we're telling our own stories. We're playing the sounds and the sort of soundscapes and ways of playing and messaging through our music that we love. So that's pretty good, and that makes a very powerful musical outcome, I think. But to answer your question, you really are playing within your limits, but at the same time, just as with that, there's so many parallels still with conventional, traditional classical music playing. We can, it's up to us, we can keep expanding our limits anyway. So, I often practice on all sorts of quite complex feats of playing, so that I can bring more and more of that into my improvisation. So
you're still progressing in your playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still exploring different terrain technically and musically, influences from other cultures. But I think the important thing about all of that is that we can, it's one thing to play a Paganini caprice. To improvise at that level, it's the equivalent of sight reading without the score. So a lot of things can go wrong too. And so to me as a player who likes to keep developing things, I'm still working, if you like, as hard as I would on any of the conventional caprices or anything, trying to develop my ability to pull things off without warning. So it's lots of fun.
I absolutely see that. And I guess, the conference that we're at the moment, the sort of theme, the overall theme is diversity and the many things that means. And I guess we can apply that to this, because what I think you're saying, if I'm getting this right, is that because you can do things within your playing means, that is actually appropriate for any level, any standard, any person in a way.
Exactly. So everyone can have a go and succeed, because even someone who's on open strings, you can get them doing very dramatic crescendos and accents and all sorts of.
And I think this is the thing that often is missing when teachers see a pupil. There can be that lack of engagement on the sort of emotional level and the expressive level, and getting that in as early as possible is brilliant.
And I think there's been a lot of suspicion of improvisation, and I have to say some of it's very well founded, okay, because improvisation can be, if it's not a genuine soul searching and we're really trying to convey something, it can be a bit boring. you know, and people have said, oh, it's improvisation, that's great to do but not so great to listen to. Well, we've turned that on its head, which is great. But I think the important thing is that we're able to, just as in a conversation, we're able to engage, and when people engage, they start a process of self-reflection. You know, when I can guarantee you the best conversations you've had outside of the pub probably, but where you've really had to go somewhere personal, it can be invigorating for the other person to listen to, because you've gone somewhere and you've touched on some things and you've sort of survived it, and that's very healing to be part of, even for an observer. And I think this is actually what this is all about. What we're talking about is that for me, getting up and kind of bearing my soul with my instrument, I think if it has engagement value, it's because I'm completely exposing everything about myself and what I love and the sort of things that are important to me. It's all there in my music.
I think that gets to the nub of music in general. Why we do it.
I think so, yeah.
There's no point in playing something that's already been written, for instance, perfectly, if it has no meaning. You know, and this is where we're saying, and I think, you know, when in classical things, if you're playing a classical piece, we get into this whole area of right and wrong, don't we? Oh, we've made a mistake, or we've done it wrong, or the interpretation isn't right. I think that you've got to be more open than that and say, if you play some music, whether it's written down music or it's improvised music, and you move your audience, you've done it right. Full stop.
Yeah.
Even if somebody else says, well, that's not how you play Beethoven, or, you know, what were you doing in that improvisation? If you've had an effect on your audience, to me, that's the be all and end all.
And this is where the, you know, I think we're in a phase which started probably 20 years ago or more of the classical music world of education and performance becoming a much more holistic place. I think this is where we're going with all of this. And if you look at the most progressive institutions and associations and schools, etc., they're starting to have an ethos of, no, you can't yell at the students. And what we find is with this is that progress is actually not determined by the amount of yelling. It's actually determined by the amount of encouragement and helping people feel safe, and that if they make mistakes, of course, they're not going to accept those lower standards, but they don't have to damage the person for them to rise up. All they have to do is fix the problem. Yelling is an option, damaging someone is an option, so why would you do that? And I think, but here's the thing, I think, Steve, we do that to ourselves. So we yell at ourselves already and we damage ourselves, and that too is an option. And that's what I think we're also unwinding here in the modern educational context, is we're making things more holistic. And I know we're talking about improvisation here, but we can't help but touch on the culture within that we all exist here. And I think it's extremely exciting what the possibilities are, because you think about that. If someone said, I can teach you and I can make you feel really bad and yell at you, or I can encourage you, which option? You can have either. You know, what are you going to choose?
Absolutely.
So, and I think, and again, internally, our own internal coaching, you know, we can be our own worst enemy with our criticism, or we can learn to be a really good coach.
Yeah, and I think a lot of classical players, a lot of teachers are going to associate with that, because I think many people have had an experience in some way or other with that. It's almost universal. And it would be great to not have that.
It's just an option.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, you want fries with that, you know?
Yeah.
Do you
Brilliant.
like some criticism with that? Oh, thanks. Actually, I'm fine.
Yeah, I'd like some positive feedback. Yeah.
So, you know, that whole thing of how to improve. And so we've started talking about the sort of the inbuilt fear of making a mistake. And I think that with improvisation, that comes up. That's not a bad thing that it comes up. But what we can do is we can make improvisation a very supportive sort of space, so that people go, oh, okay.
And I guess that could have a really positive impact on people who suffer from performance nerves, because if you can break down that and start feeling positive, you know, that goes into all sorts of other areas. I mean, people have been studying performance anxiety for years, and I think it all comes into an overall concept, doesn't it, which is what you're talking about, and overall being good to yourself.
Well, I've got another story for you. So the first year I went out on the road improvising my own music for concerts and recitals all over Australia, and I went to the US as well, and and Austria as well, in Italy. Because I had to create the music, I was so focused on the magic and the beauty that I was wanting to share. I did this whole tour and we did recordings. I think I did 3 albums that year of my own music. And I said to my partner at the time, I forgot to get nervous this year. And so that's actually sent me, it's interesting you bring this up. Since then, I thought, what happened? And I sort of reverse engineered it. So I've actually been running a healing stage fright program, 7-step program, to help people have a really different experience. And it's not mind games, it's not pretending the audience are naked or anything like that, or that they're not there. All those things.
We've all come across
those.
those.
We've all told those things. Ridiculous. But, they've helped probably. But now we can do it in a way which is actually people shifting their whole orientation of why they're even up there playing. And I won't go into it now, it's a longer story for another time. But, very encouraging results where people are starting to just feel completely different about their playing. Just for what you said, we start to feel safe and encouraged, and anxiety is an option. You can always choose it if you want. But
I think it's fantastic, and it's been great hearing you. And it's the first time I've been inspired to get out of that comfort zone and actually just do the sort of classical improvisation and get out there and do it. Whether I will, I don't know, but it's nice to feel that I'm actually considering it.
Well, we should book up a duo at Cadogan Hall or something for the summer.
Let's do it. Yeah, why not? And I think, final thing is, have you ever had a situation, because I'm sitting here thinking, I wonder if that's ever happened to Rupert. Have you had the situation where somebody's listened to your music and hasn't known that it's improvised? Have you had somebody say, when did you write that piece, or who wrote that piece? Because I think that's the ultimate, in a way, that's the ultimate accolade.
You're right on.
Because if somebody comes and says to you, that was great, when, who wrote it, or when did you write it? That, for somebody who's not used to improvisation, that's perfect. Is that what you want to hear, in a way?
It's what I expect of myself, for a start, because I think if we're improvising, there's context, okay? Let me give context. If I'm improvising on stage, I owe it to my audience that they can't tell the difference. Because if we're talking about offering something that's less engaging, less emotionally rewarding, and less of a kind of, healing experience in some way, to give it a name, I don't think, why would I do it? I'd go back to repertoire. So in that sense, but I'll tell you a funny story about that, because I've put in for funding sometimes, and I've included a CD. In those days, it was CD. Put a CD in, saying,
I like it in those days. It's scary, isn't it? Now you're talking about it. Haven't got a CD player anyway. Sorry, carry on.
So, and the application got knocked back, and I wrote to them. I said, "Well, can you give me some feedback?" Because I thought it was a pretty good application. And they said, "You didn't say on the CD, because it was a whole sonata, like 45 minutes, 3 movements in 3 15-minute movements. You didn't say which part was improvised." But fair enough, because they'd never heard of it, so I can understand. But it's just one of those funny things. We just wore it, that one sank. But they it's so unusual, I think, in a way. So fair enough that they would think, well, there must be music and then there's improvisation. He didn't say. So yeah.
Well, I think it's been fantastic talking to Rupert. Thank you, Rupert, for giving up your time.
My pleasure.
I think everybody should go out there. First of all, you should try some improvisation. And secondly, you should get some albums of Rupert's. I'm sure they're available online.
Yeah, they are somewhere. Actually. If you go to Bandcamp, I'm now.
Brilliant.
Everything's up there.
Great. Well,
thank you.
Find Rupert on Bandcamp, and thank you so much for talking to me.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Steve. Thanks for having me.